Why everyone is leaving Mexico. There is a big trend happening. The mass exodus of American and Canadian expats. People who are leaving Mexico for a freer land abroad. For many years, Mexico was hailed as the promised land for so many American and Canadian expats that called Mexico their home. People who have lived in Mexico for so many years are now departing the country located in Central America. All of this is happening due to very drastic and uncomfortable changes that are happening inside Mexico. Today I'm going to fill you in why expats are departing Mexico. One of the most recent developments that we are seeing right now are the anti-gringo protests that are happening not just in Mexico City, but in other parts of Mexico as well. The citizens of Mexico are increasingly more dissatisfied with their land being occupied by their North American counterparts, including citizens of the United States of America and Canada. Usually people have some kind of concerns when they see more and more foreigners relocating to their native lands. I think this goes without saying. So while many Mexicans probably had the thought of maybe not being in alignment with their land being occupied and having to see how they have to compete with foreigners for the services that are provided inside their own country. They had to accept that people with a greater purchasing power move to Mexico to compete with them. I think this is a tough pill to swallow. Now today, Mexico is seeing a rapid increase in anti-foreigner protests. Why are these anti-foreigner protests happening, you may ask? They're happening because foreigners, meaning expats from the United States and Canada, and even Europe, are competing with Mexicans for housing, food, services, and many other things. Some of Mexico's most lavish and prominent neighborhoods, Roma Norte and Condesa, are now seeing an increase in anti-foreigner protests. These two neighborhoods became magnets for US and Canadian expats. Many Americans and Canadians bought real estate in these two neighborhoods, increasing housing prices to a level Mexicans never thought possible. While Americans and Canadians have been enjoying the life that these two brilliant neighborhoods in Mexico City have to offer, locals see the increasing amount of foreigners in these two neighborhoods as the very threat to their own existence. It isn't just about competing with the services. The problem goes much deeper. Mexicans are complaining about a lack of cultural integration, meaning foreigners do not adjust to local norms. And many Americans, some argue most of them, refuse to speak Spanish in Mexico City. The recent protests have brought awareness to the general population to illustrate that there is indeed a problem. As a logical consequence, Americans and Canadians no longer feel at home in Mexico. It is totally understandable why Americans and Canadians prefer Mexico over so many Latin American countries. The proximity to their native countries, the US and Canada, is so much more conducive than if they were to relocate to a different Latin American country, say a country located in South America. Today, many expats report cold faces, not so polite natives that once used to welcome them to their very land. Now, there are many Canadians and Americans who worked hard, who integrated, and who made the sacrifices that any host country wants to see, are now feeling the pain. They are being rejected by the local population, despite of their tremendous efforts, despite of their willingness to embrace the local culture and norms. Mexicans aren't as welcoming to people who integrated before. However, it is true that Mexico remains overwhelmingly hospitable to American and Canadian expats, assuming they decide to visit the country on a tourist visa. I think Mexico wants to see fewer Americans and Canadians relocating to Mexico in the coming years. Now that we have addressed the ongoing protests in Mexico City, let's have a look at another super important issue, which is the rising cost of living and how it makes expats choose other destinations in Latin America. And some even look into Europe. Mexico's biggest selling point is not that it's south of the border, it's the cost of living. That's why so many American and Canadian expats decided to relocate to Mexico years ago. But fast forward to today, Mexico has gotten a lot more expensive than just a handful of years ago. There are more and more people with money competing for the same services. The more money is chasing a service, the more expensive it will become. Just a few short years ago, expats, including those from Europe, Australia, North America, and many other destinations worldwide, boasted about Mexico's affordability. Inflation isn't really slowing down. In Mexico City's most popular areas, rental prices have skyrocketed in recent years, crushing the local population and making these areas a lot less affordable for Mexico's middle class and even upper middle class. The bottom line is that expats chose Mexico for its affordability. Expats chose Mexico for its freedom and for its hospitality. However, the truth is that the quality is going down pretty rapidly. Things are more expensive and there's less of a feeling of being welcomed. Now, before we get into a very important point, which is how you can choose a lower cost of living country, a more welcoming country in a different geographic location, I wanted to focus on a few more points. One of the biggest issues associated with relocating to Mexico this very year is the difficulty associated with obtaining a residency. Whether we're talking about temporary or permanent residency doesn't really matter because it's gotten a lot more difficult to relocate to Mexico on a permanent basis. The once popular and easily accessible regularization program has gone away. A residency option that was so popular among American and Canadian expats is no longer available this year. Things are changing in Mexico. Immigration is tightening. And obtaining residency is so much more difficult because you need a much greater income. Now, to obtain temporary residency in Mexico in 2025, you have to prove an income of 4,100 United States dollars. Now, this is a lot because at the end of the day, you must have an income of at least $48,000 annually to qualify for temporary residency in Mexico. This is not a low income at all, and most Mexicans don't make anywhere near $48,000 annually. In fact, many Mexicans don't even make half of that. So the $48,000 annually is definitely quite high. Now, to obtain permanent residency in Mexico, you must prove an income of at least $7,000 monthly, which comes down to $84,000 annually. Now, to be fair, Mexico has the right to increase the monthly income requirement as it sees fit. Mexico has the right to do that. And it's all based on supply and demand. Because so many American and Canadian expats choose Mexico over other Latin American countries, Mexico had to increase its income requirements, making it more difficult for the average Canadian and American expat to immigrate to Mexico. However, people with such an income of $48,000 annually to qualify for temporary residency or $84,000 annually to qualify for permanent residency would rather choose a more affordable country, and most importantly, a country with much easier residency requirements. And we're going to get to this in just a moment. Yes, the once famous regularization loophole is gone. It's no longer available. Also, visa runs are becoming harder, and residency income requirements are through the roof. There are better options out there, and we're going to get to this in just a moment. Another important factor that I see people complaining about is the increasing wokeness across Mexico. A country that once used to be quite conservative is turning more and more woke as time goes by, making it less attractive for conservative American and Canadian expats that seek conservative family life or simply want to retain conservative family values. We can clearly see the societal structural changes on the streets of Mexican cities, but it actually starts at school. The education is changing. Alright, let's talk about more welcoming countries where obtaining residency is actually easier than in Mexico. Something that I almost forgot to mention. Apart from the monthly income requirement residency option that Mexico has, you may also qualify for Mexican residency by proving savings. Now, to obtain permanent residency, you must have savings of about $100,000. And slightly less if you want to qualify for temporary residency by savings. You see, these numbers are not that convenient for the average person. And many people who have that kind of income or savings would rather relocate to a developing country that is safer, cheaper, and comes with a better legal structure than Mexico. Now, today, American and Canadian expats prefer Paraguay over Mexico. Why is that? Well, to obtain Paraguayan residency, you don't have to show an income proof. You also don't have to prove savings. In fact, what you have to prove is a clean criminal record certificate. And that gets you Paraguayan residency pretty easily. Citizens of the United States of America, Canada, European Union, United Kingdom, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan can apply for Paraguay's Friendly Nations visa. Paraguay is one of the most conservative countries in the world today. There are few countries that are more conservative than Paraguay. And some of these countries you may not want to live in because you won't be welcomed. But Paraguay is a very hospitable country located in the heart of South America. It borders Bolivia to the north, Brazil to the east, and Argentina to the south. Paraguay is a country of immigrants, and it is not overrun by expats. And the country is developing into something beautiful. And that's why we at Nomad Elite recommend you to start looking into residency in Paraguay. Also, Paraguay makes owning a firearm relatively easily. Something that is almost impossible in Mexico is actually quite feasible in Paraguay. The cost of living is much lower in Paraguay than in Mexico. Paraguayans are more conservative than Mexicans. The food quality is definitely superior here in Paraguay. And Paraguay also offers a younger median age than Mexico. You see, there are many pluses. Another country you might want to consider is Panama. The Central American country has long been known for its beautiful, stunning beaches, tropical weather, Americanized environment, and hospitable population. Panama is home to the Friendly Nations visa program that allows Americans and Canadians to qualify for Panamanian residency by company formation, employment, or real estate purchase. Panama is possibly the most Americanized country in whole Latin America and has welcomed Canadians over many years. Uruguay is another option. You may qualify for Uruguayan residency by proving a consistent monthly income. There's also a path to Uruguayan residency through real estate investment and company formation. Now, if you're not interested in Latin America and would prefer living in Eastern Europe, there are many countries that offer residency by real estate purchase, including Serbia, Bosnia, and Montenegro. Now, the countries that I just mentioned, Bosnia, Serbia, and Montenegro, are low-tax countries located in Eastern Europe that are conducive for entrepreneurs looking to starting businesses and employing people in Eastern Europe. Bulgaria is another interesting low-tax country located in Eastern Europe. It's part of the European Union and offers one of the lowest cost of living in whole Europe. Now, Panama, Paraguay, and Uruguay are very tax-friendly countries that will not tax your foreign-sourced income. On top of that, Paraguay is one of the lowest tax countries in the entire world. If you're interested in moving to Paraguay, Panama, Uruguay, Albania, Bulgaria, or Serbia, please book a consultation with us today. Go to nomadelite.com and click on book a consultation. Thank you so much for watching Nomad Elite. I truly appreciate your attendance, and I look forward to helping you relocate to Latin America or Europe.